Hello and welcome to my podcast episode project. I'm Everix Mahan and this is my final for Healing Through Indigenous Art and Literature. Today we will be exploring the novel There There by Tommy Orange. There There is a literary fiction novel published in 2018 and written by Tommy Orange. The novel was critically acclaimed quite quickly after its release. According to Rutgers New Brunswick, Orange received the John Leonard Prize in 2018, awarded for an author's first book in any genre. In 2019, Orange also received the PEN Hemingway Award, which is dedicated to first-time authors of full-length fiction books, and the American Book Award, denoting outstanding literary achievement. Orange himself is a registered member of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma. Like many of the characters in There There, he was born and raised in California. The Penguin Random House Speakers Bureau reports that Orange was a 2014 MacDowell Fellow and a 2016 Writing by Writers Fellow, and according to an interview with NPR on June 8, 2018, Orange earned a degree in sound engineering. He also received his MFA in 2016 at the Institute of American Indian Arts in New Mexico. Following this, he wound up working simultaneously in the mental health department at the Native American Health Center in Oakland and at a used bookstore where he developed a passion for reading, sparking his literary journey, as stated in an interview with the University of Denver on April 6, 2021. And thus, the process of writing There There began. There There itself follows a bit of time in the lives of 12 individuals who all plan to go to the Oakland powwow, then switches between these perspectives during a shooting at the event. Most characters are Native themselves, but some are just close to people who are. They all have different reasons to go to the powwow. A few plan to rob it, one plans to go as an intern because his father is the MC, one goes because he's collecting stories told by Indigenous people, and some simply go to have the experience. Each character themselves deals with their own unique struggles that are not exclusively Native, but often are exacerbated by their identity. For example, several deal with alcoholism. This is not a specifically Native struggle, but it has long been assumed to be, and this is addressed in the novel. Alcoholism lurks in the background of many of the characters' lives, but that is not necessarily because they're Indigenous. As Harvey states in the novel, it's not the alcohol. There's not some special relationship between Indians and alcohol. It's just what's cheap, available, legal. It's what we have to go to when it seems like we have nothing else left. In a similar vein, the topic of suicide is addressed as well. Outside of fiction, Indigenous suicide rates are already high. The CDC reported on September 16, 2022 that non-Hispanic Native American suicide rates are far higher than any other ethnic group, yet they have so little systemic and interpersonal support. Several of the characters in There There have family members or friends who committed suicide too. In the novel, Harvey addresses this topic in a speech, saying, "What I'm here to talk about is how our whole approach since day one has been like this. Kids are jumping out of the windows of burning buildings, falling to their deaths, and we think the problem is that they're jumping. This is what we've done. We've tried to find ways to get them to stop jumping. Convince them that burning alive is better than leaving when the shit gets too hot for them to take. We've boarded up windows and made better nets to catch them, found more convincing ways to tell them not to jump. They're making the decision that it's better to be dead and gone than to be alive in what we have here, this life, the one we've made for them, the one they've inherited. And we're either involved and have a hand in each one of their deaths, or we're absent, which is still involvement, just like silence is not silence, but is not speaking up." These passages highlight the real problem behind Native alcoholism and suicides: lack of support. After all, it's hard to find the world to be worthy of presently living in if nobody seems to care about you. After a certain point, it doesn't matter if you have a great relationship with your family if your community and your country can't back you up in an effective way. Orange tackles these problems briefly but very succinctly in this portion of the novel. Along with these topics, the characters also exhibit other struggles that anyone could face, from fetal alcohol syndrome, or as Tony calls it, the drome, to debt, to obesity, to rape and abuse. The novel serves to explore the intersection between Indigenous life and various common issues. Orange expresses in several interviews that he simply wanted to write about Native people growing up in urban areas, showcasing their unique situations. In his 2021 interview with the University of Denver, Orange explains how Native fiction made him feel all the more isolated because he didn't have the experience of growing up on a reservation the way many Indigenous authors and characters did. And this is no surprise. As reported by Oxford Bibliographies in June 2022, at last count, over 70% of Indigenous Americans lived in urban areas, which is over 4 million people who are underrepresented in literature. Orange wrote There in an attempt to bridge that gap. Additionally, like many Native writers, Orange sought to dispel stereotypes associated with Indigenous people and offer authentic representation. In the aforementioned 2018 NPR interview, Orange says, "There's a dehumanization that happened with Native people because of all these misconceptions about what we are. And it's convenient to think of us as gone, or drunks, or dumb. It's convenient to not have to think about a brutal history and a people surviving and still being alive and well today, thriving in various different forms of life, good and bad. I wanted to represent a range of human experience as a way to humanize Native people." There explores these misconceptions and conflicts with a careful and thorough hand, along with several small essays about Indigenous issues, providing background knowledge and context. Orange offers representation for many different kinds of people who are Native without growing up on reservations or even surrounded by their own tribes. Using multiple perspectives, going between first, second, and third person, each character can personally connect with the reader and have their own distinct life and voice. Each of the characters has a different, compelling story, and with this format, Orange shows not just one facet or possibility of Indigenous life, but rather many, which only supports his goal in offering a glimpse into different forms of the human experience. These are not Native problems, just Native characters. There hits on many of the themes we've discussed in class this semester. The essays at the beginning and middle of the novel that address the history of certain topics hit most on responsibility, educating the reader more thoroughly than they might have been before about why certain things are happening in the book. They provide a greater context for the story, thereby providing a greater education of history, as we talked about in class. It also fits with reciprocity because it tackles stereotypes and dismantles them through the characters' lived experiences. The whole book also fits with relevance. As previously stated, Orange set out to create a book that was relevant to the way that most Indigenous people live now, in urban areas. He provides literature that is more relevant to a wide portion of the Native audience, while still recognizing and learning from the experiences of past Indigenous people. One moment also stood out to me as fitting particularly well with survivance. There is a scene in Opal Viola Victoria Bear Shield's perspective that is not unlike A Council of Dolls by Mona Susan Power. In this scene, Opal has a conversation with her teddy bear, Two Shoes, and he says, "You gotta know about the history of your people. How you got to be here, that's all based on what people done to get you here. Us bears, you Indians, we've been through a lot. They tried to kill us. But then when you hear them tell it, they make history seem like one big heroic adventure across an empty forest. There were bears and Indians all over the place. Sister, they slit all our throats." In class, we talked about how a main idea in survivance is placing the blame in the right place. By framing Indigenous stories around Indigenous people, you highlight their survival and resistance to oppression, resulting in the word, survivance. This passage highlights the same idea, though only in a minor scene. Most prominently, the novel focuses on identity. Many characters in There struggle with their identities, especially in the context of Indigenous identity when they didn't grow up surrounded by other Native Americans. One character, Thomas Frank, is mixed, and in one of his chapters, Orange writes, "You're from a people who took and took and took and took, and from a people taken. You were both, and neither. When you took baths, you'd stare at your brown arms against your white legs in the water and wonder what they were doing together on the same body, in the same bathtub." This passage highlights how out of place people of mixed race ethnicities can feel, especially when they don't have access to a lot of representation around them. Another character, Calvin Johnson, explains that his identity is complicated because both of his parents have Native blood, but they don't know the tribe names. He says, "I don't know. I feel bad sometimes even saying I'm Native. Mostly, I just feel like I'm from Oakland." Similarly, Orville Redfeather describes the image he sees in the mirror when he wears his family's regalia as a boy playing dress-up. Because they didn't grow up immersed in his Indigenous culture, they feel uncomfortable even claiming it. These identity struggles are ones that are not often addressed in popular Native American culture, which is why Orange's writing stands out so much. Reading There was a more modern, realistic fiction selection than the other stories we've read in class, and this is part of why I really enjoyed it. I liked being able to pick apart the American Indian Studies themes that we've been talking about in class, even if they were only in passing scenes. I felt I could connect with characters and understand them better in a modern format rather than historical fiction or fantasy, and we hadn't read much about Indigenous life beyond reservations. We had talked about assimilation, but not about the generational effects of it, and I think that reading this book gave me a greater understanding. I would definitely recommend it to anyone looking for a more modern story about characters with their own unique struggles coming together in complicated and messy ways. It was fantastically written, and I will probably be looking for more books by Tommy Orange in the future. This has been my final project for my honors class, Healing Through Indigenous Art and Literature. Thank you for listening.